personalized children's book project.
Cool. Okay, well, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? I've got a pretty loud voice, so that should be no problem. So yeah, thanks to you guys for having me. My name is Mike Vaggalis. I'm the founder of Keepsake Tales. We're branding ourselves as the most personalized children's book company in the world, which I also think makes pretty cool gifts. Before I jump in, I just want to say thank you guys for being here. I've been coming to 1 Million Cups for about a month now, and I've been really just blown away by both the presenters, like we just saw, and the feedback that this audience has had for other presenters. So I'm really excited to share my story with this group, the story of my brand new company, Keepsake Tales, and I've got a couple points of feedback that I'm specifically looking for, but interested generally in your guys' feedback as well. So with that, two specific things that I'm looking for. One is a very tactical question. We're brand new, we're in our pilot test right now, and we're learning that we are a multi-touch sale. So I'd love any feedback from this group on what you guys have seen work really well from a conversion perspective in the mid or lower marketing funnel process. And then two is, I love that statement, 99% of companies are rich in everything other than capital. That is absolutely true of Keepsake Tales. So if you guys have recommendations for investors in a space that's relevant to what we're doing, would love introductions or recommendations there. With that, I'll jump into Keepsake a little bit by starting with my story, which starts, as with all of us, when I was really little. And I grew up loving stories. Just fundamental to my DNA is I love reading. I'm a book nerd. My wife calls Tom Clancy the other woman. And when I was little, I asked everybody I could think of to read to me, from my parents to my great-grandmother who's in this picture, and that just sparked a lifelong love of reading, which, as we'll see, becomes really important to what I'm doing now. So I grew up in a small town called Conifer, Colorado. I'd be shocked if any of you have heard of it. Went and got my undergrad from Miami of Ohio, where I studied British literature because I love books and stories, and finance because I didn't know how to make a career out of books and stories. Out of undergrad, I went and had the great opportunity to work for Allstate Insurance. I was hired into a leadership development rotational program, so I wore a lot of different hats in my 5 years with Allstate, from the back office and operational P&L analysis to sales and running a sales market of 35 agents. So really did a lot of things within that organization and kind of cut my teeth in the business world and learned a lot about how businesses work and how they make money and everything in between. My last 2 years at Allstate, I went back and got my MBA from Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management, where I did that in the evenings and weekends. So I was one of those people that you never really saw for a couple of years because I was either working or in a class or a class project or something. And when I was at Northwestern, I learned a couple really important things. One, marketing is way more fun than finance. So sorry to anybody that's in finance, I still have much love for you guys. But developed just a love for marketing. The second was I took a lot of entrepreneurship classes, and I fell in love with the idea of starting something, building something new. And I decided that if I ever got the opportunity or had the idea that I thought could work, and that thought was something that was validated through consumer interviews, I'd take a step and do it. I didn't have that idea coming out of Northwestern, but I did have the opportunity to step into marketing, which brought me down here. So I joined Burt's Bees on their brand innovation and marketing team, and learned a lot of the fundamentals about how do marketers think and how do marketers perceive the world and do consumer discovery. My last couple of months with Burt's, about 4 or 5 months ago, I had an idea that I thought was different, and that idea has turned into Keepsake Tales. And it was personalized children's books. And I went online and I looked and I saw that there were some competitors in the space who are doing personalized children's books, but none of them were doing it in the way that I had in my mind. So, being an MBA who studied this stuff, I went and started doing consumer discovery, and I started talking to people. And just as you can see, I talked with a lot of people. in a couple month time period, I talked with over 170 people. I learned that there was greater than an 83% positive response rate toward the idea of what we were doing. So if we could execute it, it seems like there's interest in it. I would never claim to have product market fit until we've driven revenue. But we had a good leading indicator. And most importantly, I developed some really acute understandings of the pain points in consumers, customers, and creators as three key groups of people that we will work with. And I'll summarize those in this slide. Consumers I define as the people who consume and read children's books, so parents and children primarily. There were three pain points that came through as major themes in my discovery work. The first is that parents want to limit screen time for their children. This one speaks near and dear to my heart as a self-proclaimed bookworm, and so they're looking for an alternative to screen time. Secondly is parents wish that they had more tangible keepsakes that could commemorate and memorialize significant moments in their children's lives. Third, and this one's super important and we'll circle back to it, is there's a smaller number of people who had the highest emotional response to what we're doing, who said, my children can't see themselves, or my child can't see himself or herself in existing children's books in the market today. Customers, this one should be no surprise. We all want to be seen as meaningful gift givers, and there's a real or a perceived lack of meaningful gifts on the market today. And creators. This is a really difficult market for people to break into. There are people that invest years of their lives to go back to school to get their Masters of Fine Arts in children's literature, only to graduate from that program and find out that they can't get into Barnes & Noble. So it's an exceptionally difficult market to break into as an author or an illustrator, unless there's a differentiated proposition for that new author to break into the market. The most important one of these that our team is laser focused on right now is this one. My child can't see himself or herself in the story. Turns out there's groups of children that are majorly underrepresented in mass-produced children's books, both children of color and children who have a disability of some kind. Or like my wife's an audiologist, and she works with kids who have hearing aids and are really sensitive about that. And there aren't books that are for those kids, and we are. So what do? We take a picture of children, and this is my co-founder's 4 kids, and we have a team of digital artists that translates that picture and turns it into an illustration that matches the illustration style in the story. So every child, regardless of what they look like, regardless of their skin tone, regardless of their ability level, can see themselves in the story. And I think that this really solves those 5 consumer, customer, and creator pain points in a really special way. So a couple of verbatims from my discovery work. With this concept, we can give our daughter a book rather than rely on screens. And that's really important, obviously, to me, and part of the reason I started the company, to create child-driven demand away from screens towards something that's good, like books. As a parent, we will be able to capture memories in our son's life as he grows up. That's from an interview that I did with my good friend Travis. He used Keepsake in that interview, which has obviously become pretty important to our positioning. One of the most emotionally charged interviews I had was with a lady whose daughter has Down syndrome. And she said, my child can't see herself in normal books. She would feel so special if she could, though. And that's what we're all about. And then a keepsake tale would make an incredibly memorable gift. This was a theme that ran throughout virtually every interview that I did. So what's our mission? Our mission is to show every child how valuable they are, regardless of what they look like, by putting themselves in the story. At Keepsake Tales, we believe that people are intrinsically valuable, and there's groups of children who don't grow up understanding that or knowing that, in part because they don't see themselves in the stories that they consume. And so, we're all about changing that. So what's our traction today? What are some of our key assumptions? From a desirability perspective, like I said, we're in our pilot phase right now. We've got good leading indicators that we've got product market fit, and we're validating that with revenue through a 3-week pilot phase that's nearing its conclusion right now. Feasibility perspective, we've developed key relationships, one with a variable print shop, which if any of you guys have learned about printing or worked in printing in the past, most traditional print companies print runs of 500 or 1,000 books, which doesn't work with our model. So we found a company whose business model does. We've got a personalization team that we're working with to actually execute our personalization, and they're the specialists in digital art. We've got influencers, one who posted last night, one who's posting today. An awesome partnership that we developed with Big Brothers Big Sisters of the Triangle that I'm really excited about, and want to expand and get more into the how do we give back phase, and I think that's a great first step. From a viability perspective, we have strong margins. We'll have much stronger margins as we gain efficiencies in our process and as we gain scale. And there's some other things, obviously, that'll help us in the long term. Our top 3 assumptions: 1, product market fit. That's essential, and we're demonstrating that with our pilot phase right now. 2 is that we can consistently generate illustrations that accurately represent the child while matching the illustration style of the story. And that longer term, we can create a content pipeline by solving the creator challenge of this is a really hard market to break into. White space opportunity, I'll focus just a second on this. I think about this in a couple of ways. 1, within the personalized children's book space, we are differentiated by being the most personalized because we have the most flexible illustration personalization model. We're not trying to supplant Dr. Seuss, but I do think there's a really compelling way that our personalized book model can fit on the shelf alongside Dr. Seuss and Eric Carle and some of the classics. Traditional personalization companies like Snapfish and Shutterfly, personalization is growing at a 10% CAGR, and the traditional personalization models, there's room both for them and for us. And then screen time, this is kind of our enemy, right? We're positioning ourselves against screen time by creating a child-driven demand away from screens toward books. So our roadmap. To date, we've built our operations in order to get a pilot test going. I've been so fortunate to have developed an amazing team of people that I can talk about later, but we've got just some of the best folks in the world working on this thing with me, and I'm so excited about that. And like I said, we're in our pilot phase now, so shameless plug. If anybody's looking for a memorable Christmas gift, look us up at keepsaketales.org. You can save 20% with discount code Keepsake, Mike. But in all seriousness, right now, what we're doing is we're demonstrating product market fit, and we're learning so much about operations and how to make the operations of this thing work. We're learning about marketing and what channels are effective and which aren't. So we're just learning a lot. By the end of 2019, my goal is to finish development of book 2 and be well on our way toward raising a pre-seed round of funding, which will enable us really to invest in our operational capabilities, in marketing channels, in product development, in things that I'm not an expert in, like UX, UI, web design, and making it really streamlined and easy for consumers to get to our landing page and convert. And then by the end of Q1 2020, my goal is to have 5 books in market, to have closed our pre-seed round, and to be well on our way toward really building this company. With that, again, the 2 key questions that I have, and I'm interested in way more feedback beyond this, but effectively driving conversion, and then fundraising and investor introductions. With that, I'd love to take questions, comments, and I will be taking notes.
So, how many parents and grandparents do we have? Thank you. Wow. Who wants to go first with their questions? Jim.
My first question is, what do you see as your route to market? How do you get the message out that you have a product that would be appealing to me, my grandson?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the things that we've been learning through our pilot, it doesn't matter. One of the things that we've been learning a lot through our pilot is that my initial assumptions on driving reach and awareness, we've surpassed those, primarily through social, and then influencers are going to be really, really key to us. So influencer marketing, social marketing, and search marketing will kind of be our workhorses. I don't know, does that answer your question?
Socials being the big one that I see, so I just wanted to see if you were in that realm.
Yeah, we are. Our pilot phase has been primarily organic. We're putting some paid dollars behind a couple different message types to test which message types resonate most and help us achieve reach goals. So we're testing those. But
So my
socials-
impression is that the people that have gotten money, that are gonna spend money on this right away, are gonna be grandparents.
You got it.
They're not necessarily on social media.
A lot of grandparents are.
My mom just got on it. So,
Yeah.
you gotta think about that. She would be all over this.
And if you have recommendations for how to effectively reach that audience, I am all ears. But that is why I separated the consumer and the customer. One of the key things that we learned through discovery is that most people are buying this as a gift, not as the primary consumer. So point well taken.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good, thanks, Mike. Jim?
Hi, Mike.
Hey.
I'm Jim.
Thanks for the coffee.
Great deck, by the way. Really enjoyed it. So screen time's the enemy. I kind of agree with that, you know,
Thank
as a parent and a grandparent. But have you considered a digital model? You know, seriously, where like you could read your books by Kindle or whatever.
Yeah, that was my leading option before I did consumer discovery because it would enable me to not have to have a supply chain. And because, I mean, overwhelmingly, parents said, I don't want my kids on screens. I want to reduce the amount of screen time, which forced me to pivot and find our print partner and different people like that. So, yeah.
I have a question for you. So
Yeah.
I think it's a fantastic idea. I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old.
Thank you.
I know we're all parents and grandparents. I've got a ways to go for the grandparent, but you know what it made me think of was not only the child seeing themselves in the story, right? And I think of Berenstain Bears, right? And the Stranger Danger, that all of those stories, right? So they're learning as well as potentially seeing themselves in it. But a lot of our families these days are also far apart. So I think of, you know, grandma's out in Utah, grandpa's in Indiana, you know, your families are extended, and so now I have to take a picture and go, remember, this is your grandma, remember that time they came and visited? And so it would be unique and interesting to me as a parent, and even, I think, more, you know, that memory, right, that keepsake of saying, hey, we went and did this together, and you not only have the child in the story, but you actually have the grandparent in the family or the family member included in that family as well. So as you go through that, they identify with the memory, with the actual person that it happened with, and perhaps there's a learning, you know, component to that story as well. But I think it's a wonderful idea. I'm really excited to see what you guys do.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And keepsaketales.org, discount code keepsake, Mike, always be closing. But no, that's a really that's a point well taken. When I think about story collections, I think there's a lot of opportunity for integrating other family members into the stories in different ways. When we think about our story collections, I kind of think about there being a couple types. One is being very occasion-based, so birthdays, holidays, first day of school, when you lose your first tooth, those sort of occasions. The second being more prototypical children's stories, where there's a lesson or a moral or something that the child's learning and walking away with. The challenge that we have with creating individual stories that have the flexibility in the story is that, so maybe a better way to say is, our model is to have existing stories that have base illustrations and base text that are then personalized in the details. So we integrate the child's face. There could very well be a book that's intended to be a child and a grandparent book and capitalize on making that, developing that relationship. But we would need to invest in that specific book rather than having the flexibility to say, this is going to be a book that we create. Yeah, we don't have that much flexibility, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Thanks, Mike. Kara?
Yeah, I have a question. Right here, I did your research about this. There's some companies already, you know what I'm saying, who are doing digitalization where you can put grandma and grandpa, and you know what I'm saying, on those pictures, that it's digitalization that even they're miles away, you can, grandpa's voice can be read in the book,
Yeah.
and you guys communicate. There's already some of that stuff already exists. And one other thing, have you done a lot of research of your competitors? Because there is a lot of stuff there for kids these days, which is happening on this stuff. You need to do a lot of research on that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of digitalization, and you can have an option. If you are a parent, you want to print the book with grandma. They already have some people who are already doing that. And then one other thing I noticed on your presentation, you spend so much time. I'm sorry to criticize, just personalizing yourself. Get to the point. If you're going to talk
Sure.
in front of investors, do not spend too much time. You gotta show me where the money, how am I gonna get my money back? You know what I'm saying? And you gotta have numbers, how you can do it right there.
Yeah, that's fair. No, and I appreciate the feedback.
Mike,
Yeah.
excuse me, 1 second, I'm gonna interrupt just for an all kindness thought. That's really not what this group is about, it's pitching to prospective investors, although we all look at it from all paradigms. I just wanted to mention that, not to correct you, but to let everyone know that it's more about exactly what you just gave him, which was a very positive critique of what needs to be shined up and honed up to button. So thank you, Carol, but it's not a pitch for investment and when we can come.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the feedback though. And then just quickly on the competitor point, our competitors are kind of broken down into two main segments. In the personalized book space, there's what I call text-based competitors that are really good at doing like mail merges and taking the child's name and integrating it into the story, or building whole stories around the name. Really, really tremendous products who build great spaces. That's not what we do. And then there's illustration-based competitors that do, the top one in the market right now, it's called a company called Hooray Heroes. And they've got, again, a really compelling, great business model that updates the illustrations like we're trying to do, but they do it using avatars, where they say choose the hair color, skin color, and eye color, and it updates an avatar accordingly. But for children who have maybe a skin type or a skin tone that's not one of the 5 skin tones that you can select, that product doesn't really work for them. Or if it's a child, for instance, with Down syndrome, who doesn't have a face structure that's represented by that avatar, that personalization model doesn't work for them. So, or a child in a wheelchair, you know, so there's a lot of great competitors who are doing really cool things in a similar space, but we're doing it in a way that heightens the personalization style. So.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
A quick question to start. How much do you expect to charge for this book? I didn't hear that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we're charging $49.99 per book, which is positioned at a premium because we have that heightened personalization model, and we're experimenting with driving velocities through discounting. But Hooray Heroes, our closest competitors, at $39.99, we're at $49.99, and we're testing again.
That sounds reasonable. I think a grandparent would pay that to have something that special.
Especially with the 20% discount.
Especially with the 20% discount. So that's $39.99 right there. But the other question I have related to that is, there are so many permutations and combinations, there's so many variables in a child. How tall are they? How old are they at the time? What their name is, the skin color, as you talked about, other diseases or afflictions that they might have, etc. I mean, if you had a list for all these different things, and then the grandparent or the parent could check off that, and then you could pull the book together from those things, I could see that working. But there's so many, you could have 10,000 different books come out to be specialized, even with a limited number of variables in that. I'm just wondering how you're thinking of doing that.
No, that's a really good question. That's one that our team has been thinking about, is how do we, the more optionality that we can give the customer up front to choose things like skin tone, hair color, eye color, the less risk we have that our artist doesn't nail it exactly how the customer's thinking about it. The challenge becomes, what our competitor does is they give those sort they get those sorts of options. So I think that the long-term value in our organization is that we've developed the capability to have flexible illustration styles and models. So it's kind of a tricky balance to trust the illustrator to do the right thing and develop the right illustration, while also giving them more inputs from the customer. But I don't want it to look like that what the customer inputs, we have to be differentiated from our competitors who those are the only inputs. The key input is the picture, not checkboxes from the
So they
customer.
send you a photo of the child?
Mhm.
For the
Yeah.
family or whatever.
For the family?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Next.
I'm gonna hit on one question you asked the audience earlier, is how do I reach that the grandparents demographic, the market? And I'm gonna build on some comments, particularly from the young lady in the back. I'm gonna flip that on its head. How many grandparents can't remember their kids, their grandkids, and whatnot due to, memory issues? And I would also add to that one of probably the biggest challenge in senior care is loneliness and how to solve for that. And I think you actually have a very unique ability to solve for not just keeping kids off screens, but also keeping reminders to relatives and loved ones who may be forgetting, by building both into the story. And, if you're able to advertise or sponsor in some way in some of these senior communities, reading days, reading times, reading hours, these people have a lot of time on their hands. And look, it may not even be a relative. You could just create a pen pal network that, people subscribe to as a service. And, you don't even have to worry about necessarily selling books per se, but, you might have enough revenue to send copies of the same book to the people who need to participate in the reading, whose characters are captured in those stories, and build a whole service around this that brings people together and keeps reminding folks of who's supposed to be in their lives and why. I think you'd be sending such a powerful message and solving so many problems at the same time. I think your lack of funding would go away pretty quickly, because a lot of people are concerned about that stuff.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question about children who have different abilities, and your price point and your operational process. So what does it look like if I have a kid, for example, who has psoriasis on his face, right? And so I send you the picture. Do I just get the book back and it's got what the artist's rendition is, or do I input back and forth with you around whether that's something that I actually feel like is going to help? How have you guys addressed that from an operational standpoint? How does it affect your price point?
That's a really good question. That's something that we're learning right now in our pilot phase. You got to strike the balance again between being realistic and showing an accurate depiction of the child, but also having the illustration be one that, as a mom or a dad, you're happy to see your child depicted in that way. It's got to be flattering. So I think an outstanding question for us that I don't know the answer to is what's the right amount of interaction with the customer before they get the final product. And that's a problem that our competitors don't have. They update the avatar and it updates on the screen and they can see exactly what it looks like on the screen. We don't have the ability to do that. So I'd say outstanding is right now, because we're at a smaller pilot scale, we've been going back and forth with the customers and saying, here's what your illustration looks like. Do you have any additional feedback for the artist? And we've been able to integrate those. That's a great question that we'll need to think about as we scale.
Just to follow up to that, you might find that your price point can be higher because of the personal custom nature of what you're doing. So it may make room for that. So don't hold the assumption too tightly that the price point is what it has to be if you're giving a truly custom service.
Yeah.
Okay, good point.
So I want to jump back a little bit because you mentioned several times that digital is the enemy. And I know one of the gentlemen in the back brought it up earlier. I really think that digital is your enabler. my assumption based on digital arts is that you're doing all this digitally to begin with anyway. Why not offer either a lower price tier or an entry tier to have the digital version of this to the point we're just talking about? It could be the proof point to get the imaging right. You can deliver it digitally. If they're not happy with it 100%, you can edit it digitally before you even get to a print option. Moreover, going back to one of the points in the back, it also adds the ability for you to do digital benefits, i.e. voice over text, right? I.e. Some differently able children don't work well with a physical medium. They work much better with a digital medium. I really think that by pigeonholing digital as the enemy, you're limiting yourself as an opportunity.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And you might be right. That's just not the feedback that we got from the consumers that I talked to.
Fair enough.
So if that becomes an opportunity for us to position into or expand into at some point, we might be able to do that. But as a marketer by training, my whole experience tells me listen to the consumer and do what they think is right, not what you think is right. My initial thought was exactly what you were talking about, and that just didn't come through as I talked to people about what resonates.
I want to be clear, I'm not suggesting that you don't do the physical mediums. I'm just saying that potentially the digital option is a way to start or get people in the door.
Mm-hmm.
The digital medium, I think the print medium is definitely a strong goal.
Mm-hmm.
I think the digital could be a path on the way, especially if you're developing digital in-house anyway. You're not losing anything by offering it, right?
Yeah.
You're already doing that work.
Okay. Good point. Good point. We'll think about that. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, a question about your margins on the product, because it seems like there's an excessive amount of cost going into each individual personalized book. You've got the cost of the artist doing the individual pieces. You've got just the general cost of operating a business, and then you've got the cost of print production and shipping. And for what, $49.95, that seems like, I don't know exactly what your margins are. You say they're good, but it seems like over time that's going to be pretty untenable, especially as you have to produce more and more individual products, and you're producing one book at a time. So how do you scale that in a way where the revenue model works out?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple different ways that we're thinking about that. One is, and again, I'm fortunate to have found really good suppliers. So the print shop that has a variable model where we can print units of one, but we still have access to economies of scale and volume discounts in total. So as we gain scale, margins get better. Two is we've got a good partner today doing the digital art with their art teams. We basically pay them an hourly rate. So our variable cost is just an efficiency equation of how many books can they do per hour, and that's something that we're learning in our pilot, is what are those efficiency rates. I think that we can do a couple things there. One is eventually it might become the right option to vertically integrate and in-house that capability. I'd also love, as I was talking to some of the guys before this, I would love to find a technical solution, whether that's machine learning or AI or whatever. I'm not a technologist. I would love to find that and completely reduce or eliminate that part of our cost. The challenge becomes it's really difficult to you can turn a picture into a cartoon. It's really hard to turn a picture into a cartoon that has the expressions that you need for a given story. So if I've got little Timmy who's scared in one picture and joyous in another picture, it's a really hard thing to automate that sort of thing.
Mike, one quick question. We have probably 4 or 5 other people who want to ask you a question, but we're almost out of time.
I'll be
Can
here.
you stay until for 30 minutes?
Oh, yeah.
To talk to other people?
Sure.
Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Mike. Officially mug you with 1 million cups of mud.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Are there any announcements of upcoming events that anybody would like to pop up about? If you
didn't attend the NCIDEA Entrepreneurial Summit, it was awesome. So next year, we hope they do it again, but it was at North